council meeting to order. Remind people to turn your cell phones to silent or vibrate. Let's all stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Chris, would you take the roll, please?
Councilmember Dalby?
Here.
Councilmember Rowe?
Here.
Councilmember Stevens?
Here.
Councilmember Strebe? Councilmember Berg?
Here.
Mayor Lazio?
Here. Need an approval or approval of tonight's agenda. Is there a motion for such?
So moved.
Second. Thank you.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Let's move down to item number 1. If anybody has, looking at the audience, if there's anybody that wants to address anything either on the agenda now or later, we'll give you an opportunity to do that. But let's go ahead with number 1.
Setting February 5th, 2019 as the date of a public hearing on plans, specifications, form of contract, and estimated cost for the Jefferson Street reconstruction project. Recommendation: set the public hearing.
Is there a motion?
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second. Any questions for staff? Hearing none, take the roll.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Discussion on replacement of beach sound system as presented under Beach Phase 3 Sound System 2018 RFP 4X. Recommendation: receive presentation, receive recommendation, and/or direction if applicable.
Is there a motion? Okay, then I guess we'll turn it to Andy and ask for some information, or Dwight.
All right, specific to the sound system. Mayor, there are, in front of council is a breakdown that Dwight Dolman and the engineering department put together on the beach sound system that takes us back to 2015 and then takes us forward. I want to reiterate again, and I stated this at the previous council meeting, staff is not pushing for council to make a decision on this one way or another. That is whether to pursue bids or not pursue them. All we want to do is make sure and give you an opportunity to know what has happened, what has taken place. In addition to that, what our options are. But I want to be clear, this is not something staff is forcing council to do or asking you to do. It's a legislative decision. But we do want to outline some of the items that quite frankly, are related to this topic. So having said that, we'll break this down. Essentially, there will be 3 presenters. All the lion's share of it will be the 2 gentlemen sitting in at the council tables. Very first one, Larry Seals, our Public Works Director, is going to set forth the requirements that set forth the bidding requirements that are set forth in Iowa Code. Larry will read through that, Mr. Mayor, if that's all right with you. And then at that point, I'll ask you to have Dwight walk us through the presentation of the handouts you have in front of you. So that, Mr. Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay. Good evening, Larry. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. One of the main things that I wanted to do was kind of back up. There was a good question asked by Councilman Stevens on why we give the estimated cost, and then I thought it would be a good time just to go ahead and roll from that into just a large overview of the process along with the state. It's not going to be a real detailed. I do have all the information, but it would be multiple pages long if we included everything. And we'll just roll through a few. I think it's important you need to understand the definition. A lot of the different bidding procedures and what you have to do is based on the type of project. There is, and I don't want to get too bogged down, the difference in dollar amounts and what you have to do with them if they're horizontal versus vertical, and what you are actually purchasing. So there's a multitude of levels, but this again is mainly to get back to why do we have to provide an estimate and give it to the contractors and the general public. I mean, I can see both sides. A lot of people that's not in the public bidding process, it is confusing. I'm not going to read to you. I mean, you can kind of read the definitions. And we'll just that's the overview of why we do it. Let's go to the next one. It probably has really the meat and the potatoes. Skip, to answer your question, the reason that we do give the estimated cost, state law defines what we have to do, and one of the items, once you go to the public bidding process, is provide plan, specification, and estimated cost. It's listed in several of the codes, Iowa codes and subsections. And again, I've had a lot of people in general public, state the same thing. Why do we have to give it out? A lot of times in our general discussions at meetings that I attend, that provides the contractor to see if, did he miss anything? Their bonding companies also required some sort of number. The bonding company will look, and they want a professional engineer or someone in that profession that comes up with a reasonable estimate to make sure that if they bond their contractor that, he didn't miss something, he's going to go broke, they have to pay. So it all works in conjunction with each other. As you see, it specifically says in like 26.3.1 that the government shall advertise for sealed bids for the proposed public. It's kind of interesting because the state sets one level and then it's adjusted annually by a specific board set up by the state. And then the city code has another number, which is a little more conservative, which the city can do. We can set a more conservative. We just couldn't open up the threshold higher than what the state sets as the minimum standard. And again, I don't think I'll read to you, but I just kind of want to say, the other section of 26.3.2, it says the government entity shall ensure the sufficient number of copies of the project contract documents, including all drawings, plans, specifications, and estimated total cost of the proposed improvement are made available and distributed, and that's specifically to contractors. They even tell us, because some people ask why, they tell us the max that we can charge for a set of plans, and it changes over time. Now it's set up to where we have to refund the dollar amount to the contractor if they return the plans within 14 days. There's a lot of little things that happen in the background as far as contract administration. Although even if we hire an outside firm, we pay full cost. It's not like we can say to a contractor or a consultant that, hey, we're only paying you $250, because a lot of times a large plan set costs more than that to put together, especially if you're putting it out in a 24 by 36 plan set. And again, right now, the competitive quotation for public improvements as far as state code, it lists $36,000 for a population having less than 50,000. And again, when the code comes out, that's adjusted annually every September 1st. Let's go to the next one. Then I just wanted to kind of do the highlight of what we currently have in our ordinance for purchasing and bidding. And again, it's pretty straightforward. I just kind of broke it down. You can do just verbal quotes or written quotes, 0 to 5,000. That goes through the purchasing agent. We're required to get a PO that has descriptions, attachments, stuff. It's a check and balance system that has been set up at cities all over. 0 to 10, that was a addition, and I don't know what year, that allowed, if the administrator and the finance director went together, they could actually do $10,000 with their signature before they had to come back before council and make an approval. There'd still be budgeting requirements in the background going on. 5 to 15, you need a minimum of 2 quotations or bids to be received for the contractual services. And again, there's a list of what you can do this for. 15 to 25, it requires a minimum of 2 sealed bids. And then there's some provisions if you don't receive 2 sealed bids. And then over 25, that's our local requirement instead of the state requirement. You have to have formal specifications. And the city has pretty much adopted, because of state law, all their requirements for public notice in the paper, bidding requirements as far as the number of days you have to give a contractor an option to put together. Bids, a lot of times depending on the project, they have a lot of vendors they have to go out to get quotes for either pipe, if it's a street project, or manholes, if it's equipment. There's always lead time on equipment. I mean, we've had some stuff that could take like 6 months for a manufacturer to manufacture. That's all built into our contracts if we know that such equipment has that long of lead time. And again, we follow all these just to prevent not only the appearance, but to keep us within all state and local bidding requirements. That's a very short version. And like I said, I have multiple pages that goes through the description that breaks out the difference between horizontal, vertical. There's a lot of other little things that come into play.
And Mr. Mayor, what will, if it's all right with you and council, I appreciate what Larry did in terms of establishing the fact that we do have to follow the bidding process. It may be fair to say that was not always followed to the order that it should have over the period of time that we've had the discussion on the beach sound system, but I appreciate Larry doing the research on that and establishing the fact again that we have to be transparent about that, about the bidding requirements and also showing the potential cost. So, Mr. Mayor, with that, I'll turn it back to you if you or council members have any
Are
questions.
there any questions for Larry or for Andy?
I have a comment, Your Honor.
Sure, go ahead.
I appreciate you taking the time to do that. There's evidently been some changes since I retired. Some of those things didn't used to be that way. So now that I'm clear on that, I understand why that has to be in there, and I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule. I know you're busy to do that. But
Well, I think it's a good question. I mean, you know, when it's raised, I think the general public also has the same question. You're not the first one, Skip, to think that. You know, I've even had the same thought of why would you want to tell them? And then when you hear the backside, it makes sense.
well, anyway, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if it's all right, at this point, I would like Dwight Dolman, the city engineer, to set forth. And what Dwight will do, will read us through the narrative you see council members have in front of you, and that's the phase 3 renovations. So with that, Mr. Mayor, as I said, I will turn it back over to you.
Good evening, Dwight. Glad to have you here, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Like Andy had said, in front of you, you have this chronology, which is includes all the items that are included. In your packet is all the backup documentation that goes along with it. What I'd like to do at this point is the PowerPoint presentation that you have in front of you. We're going to go through that a little bit. That's going to have some of the highlights and the lowlights of all that documentation that I just previously mentioned. And this will be for the benefit of the viewing audience as well, to get an idea as to where we're all at.
Very good.
Starting on our first slide, August 11th, 2015, we found the minutes of a meeting where former city administrator Joe Helfenberger requested that price quote be added to the park board agenda for discussion. We were able to find the price quote from Douglas Communications. It was unsigned and undated in the amount of $21,399. We were not able to find any other information on this. There's no evidence of sealed competitive bids through an RFP or a bid process as dictated by the city code. And I would like to thank Gene and his staff for being able to dig through these minutes and be able to get this information to me. Then on June 12th, 2016, which is almost a year later, we are again talking about the beach sound system, and they're still looking for funding. It has not been budgeted in the CIP. There is mention in the minutes that one of the board members is questioning the competitive bid process. Again, that is all that we were able to find on that. Going on to the next slide, and I might also bring to your attention, this was all before the renovation project started at the beach. In November of 2017, that's when the engineering department grabbed a hold of this project and brought it into the renovation process. We began by talking to a consultant that I had previously worked with up in Northwest Iowa, and his discussions with him ended up with his basic understanding of the project, and he gave us in round numbers the cost that would be about $15,000 for a $100,000 project. That would be to develop the plans and specs. I thought that was a lot of money for what we wanted to do, so I thought we would explore the idea of an RFP first. And by doing so, having done this before, and the responses can vary somewhat, we put together a selection committee, and Councilperson Berg was included in that selection committee to review the responses that we get and select the best response at the time. Now, on December 5th, 2017, we came to the council and we presented for a public hearing the idea of pursuing 6 RFPs. One was the electronic sign, the other one was the sound system, and there were 4 other beach improvements that were included in this RFP process. Now, the selection committee, we knew we were just going to focus on the electronic entrance sign and the sound system because we knew that those had the potential for variance in project descriptions. So on the sound system, we received 4 responses. And with those 4 responses, the selection committee met twice. The first meeting, we met and basically talked about the electronic sign that we received responses on. And we were able to make a clear-cut selection on that. The second meeting was to discuss the sound system responses. And we were a little bit concerned because of the variety of the responses. We received responses that were from 30,000 to 130,000. And we discussed amongst ourselves that possibly the best thing to do would be to try and reapproach this project with more detailed plans and specifications so that we could get apples to apples bid. Now, between January 24th, 2018 and February 6th, 2018, I informally met with each of you and I told you basically what the selection committee was thinking at that time. And it was pretty much unanimous to go ahead and move forward with a process where we can have detailed plans and specifications and so we can get back apples to apples bids. So on February 20th, 2018, City Council took formal action by rejecting the proposals that we received and began the process of developing plans and specifications. During this time period, we received an offer of help from one of the staff members out at Indian Hills Community College. And he is their go-to person as far as audiovisual equipment is concerned. And he was able to give us a lot of guidance and help in developing a set of plans and specs. We had another set of plans and specs developed at that time when City Administrator Morris told us that it came to him through the City Council that we should hire this one person to develop the plans and specs. He's a local sound consultant here. It was Doug Shook of Court Hill Entertainment. And Andy and I interviewed him, and for $1,500, we proceeded with having him put together the plans and specifications. Those plans and specifications were what went out to the bidding community. We received 2 bids back. Both of them were competitive. Those were presented to the council on December 18, 2018. However, the council decided to vote against the resolution to award, and the contract award failed on a 3-2 vote. So that is the long and the short of that arduous process. But I do want to point out a few key issues that come out along the way. Is that early in the project history, there was no procurement process that satisfies the city code. Like Larry had mentioned, there were different levels that we had to achieve. We never found any evidence of that being followed. Since engineering got involved at the time of the renovation project, council has been aware of and approved of all staff actions through each step of the procurement process. The latest bidding process was directed by the council, and engineering staff made an extra effort to entice local vendors to bid. The bid results followed the legal requirements for public improvement project. The contract award failed, so now we're in a situation where the project must be redesigned and rebid. So of all that, that is the long and the short of it. So with that, I will hand it back to City Administrator Morris for any additional comments.
Very good. Thank you, Dwight. Thank you, Mayor. I think at this point, it would be well to put in context that this is a conversation we've had with staff in terms of next steps. And Mayor, at this time, I would ask Larry Seals to step forward. We had some fairly extensive discussions the other day. Just to reiterate again the action that was taken by council on the vote to reject the bids, and then what our options are going forward.
Well, I think what it amounts to is, as stated, the bids were basically rejected or voted down. So at that point, you start over. I mean, they weren't tabled. Basically, the way the bidding process, as I understand it, you either approve, reject. If the project happens to be over, you can award and negotiate with the high bidder. That's something that you have to consider depending on the project. Again, you can reduce. Most of our plans and stuff are set up to where you can negotiate reduction of scope. These are a little bit different than what's standard for our office. That's, with the variety, as Dwight alluded to, when you do a project for the first time, there's typically a lot of growing pains. And we'll go back to the original process. If it had been probably maybe squared away first, we could have probably avoided some of this.
And Mr. Mayor, the last item I would add on this, just what Larry indicated, and that's this. I think I speak for staff. None of us have heard any directions from council. This is something they want to drop. Our sense is this is something that council, I believe, still wants to move forward on. We're not planting a flag on this, again, and saying that this has to be done. We did want to provide some background information. Ultimately, it's a legislative decision. We're a bit of a tight window right now, even in the month of January, but still, I think at this point, I'll turn it back over to you, and I believe there's some questions.
So I would entertain comments from the council. I see Mark.
Quick question. This goes to the last page of this slide. It says project must be redesigned and rebid. If this were to go back out for the rebidding process, is there something different that has to be in that design, or can the last design go back out?
The problem with going back out with the last design is that the bids are public information. So everybody's going to wonder, well, that was the bid that was low. That's going to be the number to bid. So that automatically puts that bidder at a disadvantage. So in all fairness, we have to try to come up with some type of a different type of a sound system to make some sort of a variance on that design so that we can go back out and get bids and not have to worry about a contractor filing a claim against us because of unfair bidding procedures.
So effectively, we have to add something to it, take something away from it, something along those lines to make it different.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Matt, did you have any? Matt or
Yeah,
Dickett?
I got some questions. I guess I'll take the blame. I'm the culprit, and I'm not trying to put any undue pressure on our city engineer or Larry or anybody. But the reason I wasn't happy with this is the way it was done. And like Dwight said, the first bids come in, they were all over the table. My question right now is the difference from the 21,000 or whatever that number was bid and the bid on the 18th was about $28,000 difference. Can you tell me why is that? Did the cost of equipment go up that much, or what happened to make that go up? I can understand 4,000 or 5,000, but 28,000.
Well, we're talking different equipment and a different scope.
And that would be another question. And why is that so much different? Is it just one person's opinion of what needs to be, or what is that?
Well, generally, whenever you're hiring a consultant, you're hiring his opinion, and this is his opinion of what needs to be installed over at the beach.
But he was involved in the beach for years before you ever came, and I don't know. One thing I will say, I obtained some information that I don't think the rest of the council has. Might not be anything in here that would change anybody's mind. I guess I'm not trying to do that at this point, but maybe it's something they should take a look at, just to be taking a look at it. It's stuff that's not in your report.
Is it specific to the sound system?
Absolutely, yeah.
You've got copies of it too.
Yeah, you
My
got
records.
This one? Let me see it.
Okay, is there other comments, Matt?
Yeah, I got a question. I think there was a lot of confusion during this process simply because it started back under a different city administrator and different things. First question, when you go to a consultant to look at a system design, there's got to be, the sky's the limit for what you can get. You could probably buy the Cadillac version. You could buy a mid-range version that would suit your purpose. You can buy probably a cheap version. When you deal with a consultant, how do you know what they're quoting you as something that we, need or don't need? I mean, we got a beach or a water park that has probably a 20-year life left in it after we renovate it. Is there a system, would this consultant advise you that there'd be a system that would be cheaper based on what we need? Or did he, I guess a consultant wouldn't have any hand in the game to say, you need this Cadillac version. But, if we got 20 years of life left in the beach, how do we know we're not getting a sound system that's way superior to what we really actually need there?
No. It was the same thing. No, we're getting the Chevy model of equipment. Let me put that in. And Gene and I can tell you that the existing equipment that we have, there's probably only one piece of equipment that's reusable. We started the project out telling the consultant, we have 25 years of life left in this facility. We want a sound system that's going to last that, and only that. And so he was aware of that from the very beginning. So like I said, this isn't the Cadillac of the systems. This is more of like a Chevy. So I know that when I talked with you informally, we talked about a project that was going to be in the $100,000 range. This turns out to be about a $50,000 project.
Yeah, and I know we had bids that were, when we reject them, were well within that range. But I didn't know. That was just for my own personal, information, because I'll add my name and my thoughts to Councilman Member Stevens. We had in our frame of reference what we thought a sound system would be. I mean, we had an old quote, although it didn't go through the proper guidelines. And then all of a sudden we see another bid, we see them all over the map. And then we come back with the final set of bids and we're double what we were before. So my question was, it was never really made clear to me, I guess. I never did ask, but it was never made clear in any of the stuff I got that, how do we evaluate what we need versus what we can get sold? And I know you guys are on top of that, but I just never knew. It just seemed like a big, like Skip said, we're doubling what we were thinking, a sound system should be. Although a few years have gone by, it was quite a shock to us. And I appreciate you guys taking the time to throw this together. I know the other night when we were looking at doing this would have been good to have this, because, this council wasn't even here when this started, the whole council. There was just several of us, and that adds to the confusion. And then we forget some things, staff might forget some things, but all I do is request that we have going forward on these types of things. And of course, we could probably do a better job in asking questions. I don't doubt that a bit. This timeline's invaluable to me. This kind of clears up the confusion I had and why I voted against it. And I think having better information like this to us when it comes to items like this that we all kind of knew was an issue. I mean, we've been dealing with this for years. Would be good. I appreciate that paperwork. So thank you for your work.
Mark?
I just had one follow-up question, and this goes back to the bidding system, the rebidding. If we decided to move forward with this and we have to do a redesign, do we have to pay for a consultant firm again to do to create the new RFP?
Unfortunately, I believe there's going to be a little extra cost there for that, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I think the issue is we've learned a valuable lesson going through this process. And my question to the council is, where do you want to go? We can't change history. We learned some things, and material and information has been very valuable tonight, but what's your pleasure and what's the direction to our staff so they know what to do? Do you want them to rebid it and re-specify the sound system so we can have something presented as a biddable item and bring it back to the council?
Your Honor, I just add my opinion for what it's worth. I was one of the no votes. I would add, I absolutely think we need one. We've had one since the beginning, and I've, kind of, tried to push this along for the last several years, so I absolutely think we do. What I would request, though, is just having good, when we have an issue that goes over many years like this, that we have a little bit better look at the timeline, because a lot of information gets lost over time. So it would be my hope that we would pursue another bidding process and be clear with our intentions.
Mr. Mayor, I don't wonder, one of the items that we probably should put into context, and that is the time allotment, the time frame we're in right now. So I don't want to put words in staff's mouths, but when we had this discussion earlier in the week, one of the challenges, as I recall, is we're on a pretty short runway if you're going to get the sound system bid out, properly done, have all the specs in order, and implement this, let's just say by the time the season starts. My takeaway from the conversations with staff, I don't know whether that's possible to do this season, even though it's 5 degrees outside. I don't know whether or not that's something we put up. I appreciate what the council member said, what Councilman Dalby said. Again, staff is not pushing this. We just don't want to get to June or July and someone say, well, staff just, they got their feelings hurt and they walked away from this and didn't do anything. But at the same time, I think we probably should acknowledge the time frame we're in. And Mayor, if it's all right, I would appreciate some thoughts, comments, and feedback from both Dwight and Larry on that important aspect of this.
Go ahead.
I don't believe either Larry or I can stand here and guarantee that it'll be done by the time the swim season starts. We can try, but a lot may change when we get ready to rebid this project. It's going to be later in the winter. Contractors will have a backlog. If they had a backlog, it may be filled by now, so they may not even bid again. So a lot of variables are there that can push this project back. And by pushing the project back, just to make sure we're upfront with everything, we may have to hire someone to limp the existing system along through another season. So there would be additional cost there as well.
And Mr. Mayor, and I'm going to hog all these, but just one other item we probably should set forth, and that's, I would be curious just myself from staff's perspective, whether this is something council would want to see, and that is in hiring. I agreed, council asked me to look into this, but when we hired Mr. Schruck, I think he did a equitable, a good job for us. I like having a disinterested third party, quite frankly, develop those specs. I know there's questions about that person bidding on them, but for my 2 cents worth, I like that component. This would not be something I would want staff to try and do on our own. This is not our area of expertise, and I think that's probably what led to, not casting any aspersions on anyone, but that's probably what led to the first time this went out, and that was give us your best shot. And as Councilman Dalby said, those were all over the map. So that I would just recommend that we do pursue as hiring an individual to help develop those. And then I would highly encourage council then to go over those specs as well. Thank you, Mayor.
Is there general consensus that we want them to move ahead, even though we don't have anything tonight that we are proposing, but with the caveats that Dwight has mentioned, timing and bidder availability and all that, whether it's a limp along and some combination of getting a new system. But I think the council's feeling was we wanted a new system that worked and was usable for the beach. And so is that the direction you want staff to go? I see some heads nodding and.
My position clear.
Yeah, one more question, and maybe Bob Jays would answer this one. Our IT person, Ed, would he be willing to work on this? I'll be honest with you, I talked to him. He didn't seem interested. Thought maybe it was a little bit different than what he's used to, but boy, he's a sharp individual.
Yes, he is. He's worth his weight in gold. But his work schedule, I mean, just with the projects that we're waiting on to get done, and with his day-to-day going through and answering questions and fixing things, I don't think he'd have the time to do so. And I don't know what his expertise is with the sound system. You know, he's a computer guy. He's not a sound system
I
person.
understand.
So,
okay, thanks.
Well, let's at least give the staff the direction that we want them to pursue this project, and you give us some kind of a recommendation back when you're ready to do that, and follow the appropriate bidding procedures so we are compliant, and we'll take a look at whatever you present to us. Is that fair enough?
Fair enough.
Okay. Thank you both very much, and thanks, Bob, for your comments. So this, at this point, will just be a recommendation for more information from the city staff.
All right, working out the bid specs.
Okay. Okay, let's move on to item 3.
Discussion on repair and or replacement of the beach wave generating system. Recommendation, receive presentation, receive recommendation and or direction if applicable.
Okay. And Dwight, you're up again.
Yeah, I'll point out to everybody that this project was never really in the repair program that we put together at the time of the assessment several years back. It kind of came as a surprise, whereas it probably shouldn't have been. We probably should have known that this had a limited life, but nonetheless, this was not in the repair plan. So what we did, and Gene and his staff had voiced concern about the repairs and the problems that they've had with the existing system. We were able to track down the original manufacturer of the system. We asked them to come in and give us an assessment of what it's going to take to fix or replace. They took a look at it and basically informed us that they didn't think that there was anything that was worth saving to replace it all. And they gave us the price, and that price was included in your packet. Their first price was actually about $145,000, whereas after we were able to go through their program and understand it a little bit better, their price came down to about $115,000. What we will need to do with this is we would follow this program of acquiring the equipment. It's proprietary in nature. We're not going to be able to go through a competitive bid process on this. We would purchase the equipment. However, we would be able to go through a competitive bid process on the installation, and the installation could be done with local contractors. So we would write up plans and specifications. Those plans and specifications are actually done, by the way. We would be able to do that for the installation. When we first saw the price tag that came with this, we started looking real hard at the repair and replacement of the individual components of the wave system. And we found out that those are available, and we could, with an aggressive maintenance program, keep the existing system running for as long as we needed to. We would, however, run the risk that there may be days that the pool would not have waves because the equipment had broken down and we'd be waiting for our part. So that would be one benefit of replacing all the equipment, is that you would eliminate that unknown. Another good part about the new equipment is that it is capable of making 8 different types of waves. And so that would be like a new attraction for the Beach Ottumwa with that type of wave making capabilities. So talking with Gene and his staff, they are leaning heavily for wanting to replace the equipment with the new. And so we just throw that out there. to let you know that this is one of the things that we're looking at, and we would go by your decision as to which direction you would like to take on this.
Questions for Gene and or Dwight? Go ahead, Mark.
So this $115,000, it was obviously something that we didn't see coming. Where would those funds come from at this point if we went to replace those?
This will come out of phase 4 funding.
Okay.
And we are overall, from a budgetary standpoint, the beach renovations have been going very well. We'll be completing phase 3. With the conclusion of phase 3, we are going to be well ahead of where we originally estimated the project to be. So there's going to be there's going to be some loose funding in phase 4.
Okay. And I guess, and I'm not trying to point fingers, I promise you that. Is there anything that from this point on, this is $115,000 that we didn't necessarily know that was going to come at us. Is there any other surprise that you can think of? Any rock that's been left unturned that's going to cost $100,000 down the road for us?
No, the only thing that I would throw out there is that because of the nature of the concrete in the pools and that, I think we need to have an aggressive maintenance program on concrete repairs. I would recommend that we probably budget $25,000 every year for potential concrete repairs to the pool floors and the pool walls.
Okay. And I guess that's kind of where I'm going long term. We've spent, we're up to $2.8 million essentially in repairs, getting this back up and running. And, here's another $115,000. That's probably part of that 2.8. But I guess I would be in agreement with you that, we need to have some sort of plan to make sure that we don't have this huge amount of repair coming at us 10 years down the line when we still have another 15 years worth of operation left at that. I can't imagine, this has been a losing venture for the city of Ottumwa for quite some time now. I can't imagine they'd want to put another $2.8 million in all in one bit because we didn't maintain, and it could have been 1.4, but we didn't take care of it when it needed to be taken care of. So now we're paying twice as much to fix a bigger problem. So I guess that would be my big takeaway from this, is that we do have something put into place for a maintenance system going forward, so we don't have some of these big repairs coming at us.
The one thing that we didn't include in the repair program, which I'm sure Gene would appreciate having, is backup pumps, so that in case any pump that does go down, he has a replacement right there. The original repair program didn't include that, so we would probably try and get that out of phase 4 as well.
Just out of curiosity, to that point, is there a potential for loss of revenue if one of those pumps does go down, or are we exposing ourselves to revenue losses for people not coming in because we don't have a pump on site?
I'll let Gene answer that.
We had that problem back in 2012 when the wave pool pump room flooded. And at that point, we had to replace several pumps and motors in the wave pool pump room. And the maintenance employee at the time also purchased several backups, which are still there. So our current maintenance employee has been more proactive in replacing those pumps and motors. So I'd say it's very unlikely that any of those pumps and motors are going to cause us any downtime. But the downtime that does hurt us is when the waves go down. When the waves don't work, people get angry. They start talking about the waves not working on social media, and the word spreads like wildfire, and all of a sudden people start going to other area pools, and then we lose revenue. So that's why it's important to replace the most important feature of the beach, which are the waves. And as Dwight said, adding the option of 8 variable features, it's almost like adding a new feature to the beach. So as far as pumps and motors go, we're in good shape.
Okay. I guess with that, I would, just for my own personal opinion, I would be for looking at replacing the the wave system.
Any other questions for Dwight or any other comments? Holly?
Knowing where we're at budget-wise on phase 4, I'd also be in favor of it. But I just had a question on the time frame moving forward. Like if we give the go-ahead, are we thinking it'll be done before it opens? Or are we going to be in the middle of the season? Or is this
No,
something-
I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get that taken care of before the season starts. If the direction is to replace the equipment, next council meeting, I will have an agenda item approving that purchase.
Okay, thanks.
Because there is like a 12-week lead time on some of the equipment.
Dwight, I just got a couple quick questions here. We're looking at 115,000 and we got possibly a 25-year life left at the beach. You know, we're looking at $4,700 a year expense if you look at it that way. Which I would lean with Holly and Mark at this point, you know, with what Gene said about being down and creating that bad social part of it. I would at this point lean toward the new system. However, I kind of like to know what your opinion is as far as from an engineering standpoint. I mean, sometimes where I work, we have an expensive system, but we keep, you know, backup pumps and certain components on hand because we know they're going to fail over 25 years. It seems like quite a gamble to try to do that and try to beat the $4,700 limit every year. And then you're probably going to tell me that there's going to be a year where if we have a catastrophic failure, we're going to be looking at a lot more than what we might have accumulated and saved over several years. From your opinion as an engineer, would you recommend to us that they should be replaced completely, the whole new system?
The thing that what makes it clear in my mind is that the idea that, well, we can't predict the future on the new system. We would hope that there isn't anything there that would cause the wave system to go down and we would lose a day with waves. If we tried to tackle with the old system of keeping that repaired, I can almost assure you that we will have days that we don't have waves. And that's going to have a big effect on customers. If they come one day and we lose the waves, they're probably not going to come back for the rest of the summer.
Right, I would agree with that. And then one other quick question: does this kind of equipment, when you replace the whole thing, come with, I'm sure, some kind of warranty? And do you have any idea how long that might be?
I did know. I'm thinking like the equipment was like a 5-year warranty,
Okay.
and but I don't think there's anything longer than that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So again, council, what's your direction to our staff? You heard Dwight say that he would be willing to prepare something and bring it back. And is that your direction? Do you want to move ahead? Again, I see several heads nodding yes. So Dwight and Gene, why don't you work up a recommendation for the next council meeting and we'll vote it up or down.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Continued budget discussions for fiscal year 2019-2020. Recommendation, receive presentation, receive recommendation and/or direction if applicable.
Okay, at this point, Andy, are you going to lead it off or is Bob?
Mr. Mayor, I'll just hand it over to you and then you introduce Mr. J.
Okay. Bob, we appreciate your being here tonight with us and going through this in more detail. So start wherever you feel necessary and let's get some discussion with council.
Well, big question will be is, do you want to go through the charts again? Is that necessary?
I don't think so, Bob. I think everybody's had their
So I
packet.
guess I would entertain questions and look at what the council thinks of the levy and what they want to do with it. If they want to accept it as what's proposed, or where we go from there.
Okay. Okay, council, anybody want to start off with comments or questions?
Your Honor, I guess I could start. And I just have Bob, just a couple general questions that might not be they're not, if I can find where one of them is. The first question I have is in relation to the Employee Benefits Fund.
Yes.
And again, this is nothing earth shattering. The 7.6% expected increase for expenditures in there. I know we don't have the insurance rates in yet for the new year, but
Correct.
what makes up that 7.6%? Is part of that what our expected rate increase, or is it
Part of
all
it
based
is
on
that,
experience?
But also probably a fairly good chunk of it's going to be the extra pension on the extra wages that are paid to police officers. That this current year is 26%. It's dropping down to 24 and change next year. So that's a portion of that increase. Why that's there. The total employee benefits, and I did two calculations. One was where you excluded the retirees portion. The amount that goes in the health insurance is 68%. If you included the retiree portion and then the total of the amount of the employee benefits, that drops down or jumps up to 73%. So the thing is that the employee benefits, that levy goes into that fund, then that fund then is, the money's transferred out to the various departments and the various funds that, based off of our budget, that goes through there. So then the money from the various departments then are transferred back to the employee benefit or the health insurance fund. So, so part of it is, like I said, it's a shot in the dark what we're going to face. We do have some of the increase built in, I believe 5% for our health insurance premiums. So come May, we'll find out for sure, or early April, I guess.
Okay. And I guess my last question for now, at least, is under the road use portion. Vehicle fuel increasing $81,000 or 52%. I guess I'm just curious, are we expecting, is that based on expected fuel price increases? Or
They're looking usage? At, yeah, they calculate into that. If you notice, most everybody had a little bit higher increase in their fuel. Based off the formula that the garage prepared, that's where that comes from.
Okay.
So,
okay, thank you.
What they think their use is and what they think the cost is going to be.
Okay. Other questions or comments?
Mr. Mayor, one of the items I'd like to point out, if it's all right,
Sure.
and Councilman Dalby and I have talked about this as well. This goes back to a conversation that actually took place a little over 2 years ago. And this is something I know our city attorney, Ms. Keith, and I talked about at some length. You may recall a discussion we had, this would have been in the spring of 2016, and it related to a franchise agreement we have with Lion Energy and what we have with our local option sales tax and whether or not we could impose, in essence, what would be franchise fees. Now I'm going to kick this off and then I'll ask the city attorney, as I like to say, to bat cleanup on it. I think one of the challenges we have, and it is somewhat enticing if we were to be able to have these franchise fees. For one thing, it would put a significant amount of money into the general fund. It does upset the apple cart a little bit on the local option sales tax provision of it. In addition to that, it would affect, that would also by extension, I think it was about $140,000, as I recall, that would take out of funding for roadway improvements for the county. And the other item that certainly comes to mind, and I had some initial discussions, I believe when David Bradford was still at John Deere, and that is the effect it has on the sales tax exemptions, and by extension then the local option sales. But some of the sales tax exemptions industries in Iowa receive, quite frankly, due to, I guess, economic incentives that the state of Iowa has provided. That wouldn't set us on his ear, but it would create a bit of a challenge. I like the idea, the concept of it anyway. It would require, as council may recall, a vote of council and then also a vote of the people. Mr. Mayor, with that, I'll ask you to hand the mic over to City Attorney Joni Keith and ask her to offer her comments as well. Thank you.
Joni, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. We have a provision in our franchise agreement with the Lion Energy to have the option to instigate or implement a franchise fee. The effect on residents would be nothing, basically. But there would be an effect for industries. Industries do have some exemption on lost on their electrical usage. So it would impact them. It would increase their share. That would be kind of offset by the rollback on commercial taxation. So it's probably maybe an even keel for them if we did implement it. It would have an impact on the county because they would lose about $140,000 would shift from the county to the city. And then we originally, and Bob J. could step in here too. I think the original estimate was maybe about 300,000.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
That includes a $140,000 shift from county to city. And there are some limitations on what it can be used for. And I understood it could not be used for general fund expenditures for salaries.
I know Ankeny has a franchise fee. Now as far as the cost wise, that would be if we just initiated a 1%. If we do it, because then basically then everybody's cost, it would just have a different title on it because the local option would no longer be charged to individual bills and the franchise fees would be charged. So it's a 1% if we do 1%. Like you say, the industries that when they've got a billing somehow figured out, Alliant probably has, and they do that based off of the energy consumed in creating a product, doesn't fall underneath the local option sales tax. So a franchise fee, though, that would be included on 100% of that. And I believe it was about $340,000 ballpark that we could gain. The Ankeny, their franchise fee, I think, when it went to vote, was for public safety. And so that's how that was determined. That's how that passed up there. And I think they've got a 2 or 3% maybe. I don't know. It's been a couple of years since we've looked at it. So I've got a file somewhere in my office, probably has that in there, but don't quote me on that part.
But if you kept it at 1%, there'd be no change for residents, basically. There would be an increase for industries, although they currently have a commercial rollback. So it might be kind of a even net for them as well.
Mr. Mayor, as I recall, one of the topics of conversation along those lines, Ms. Keith can help me out on this one, and that is the local option sales tax, and again, where that money falls to. And a good example of that, as I recall in our conversations with, you have the local option sales tax, you have road use. So based on our conversation today, it sounds to me like the lion's share of that then, if council were to decide to reallocate that, because again, it does not go into the general fund, then you're talking about it going to the proprietary account. So is that a fair statement that a larger portion of that would go to local option sales, which would be specific to streets and roads?
Well, that's limited to. 90% is streets and sewers, and 10% is property tax free.
If it was $340,000, that's a little over 10, would be about 9-point-some% of what we get on an annual basis for local option sales tax. So that would be reduced by that. Then, like I say, if it's passed, it can be passed for street improvements, public safety, different things. So depending on where what the ballot states is where the money will go based off of what's approved by the voters.
So it would require a referendum, council instigating it and having a special election.
Mr. Mayor, one last item, and this goes somewhat globally to what Bob mentioned when the meeting started. And council can't make a legislative decision on this tonight, but staff is recommending the 51 cent increase in the levy. You've seen the coverage ratio. I don't want to put Bob on the spot, 19.1%.
19.2, something like that maybe.
So it's still in a safe territory, but again, ultimately, staff is going to recommend, request anyway, the council, as I said, increase the overall levy, the property tax levy, an additional 51 cents.
Yeah, 19.17, which is very comfortable as far as having a coverage ratio for the next fiscal year. And like I said, this year, we haven't filled a spot on the police department, so there's $50,000 that's going to go back into the fund balance. And it'll adjust this figure down, a little bit, or actually increase the coverage ratio. If they don't hire them for the full year, that's going to be based off of if they would take family insurance. It's about $100,000 for them.
I believe.
And the raise, so.
Did that put, again, Bob, I believe that puts the levy at what, $22.45, if I'm reading that?
22.45, 648.
Okay.
So, if you're comfortable with that, we can go ahead and proceed and start finalizing the paperwork and things. If not, let me know what you want to do so that we can then make get everything ready, make a final presentation so we can get things ready to go for the state.
Okay, Mark?
I just wanted to make one comment, and then Councilman Strebe had asked me to ask a question for him. So just going back to the franchise fees just for a second. That 140, I know that I do remember this conversation, but what I don't remember is since that money would be coming out of the county's budget, has the county been privy to this?
I did speak with Mr. Parker when we discussed this topic in, as I said, in the spring of 16. Not popular, but we did have that conversation. That is correct. I did reach out to him.
I guess, going forward, just out of fairness, since 2/3 of the county supervisors are new since that point in time, and $140,000 out of a $21 million budget for the county, I would suspect that it'd probably behoove us to at least have that conversation with the county again. And again, this next question, Councilman Strebe had asked me to ask this question, so I'm going to try to read it verbatim here. What went into the decision-making process for the budget, and do they align with the strategic planning sessions that the council sat through this year?
Well, the department heads bring what they need to operate. And we've done that ever since I've been here. I have no idea if it follows through with the strategic planning or not. Usually something that would follow through on that would be something in the, with the CIP. Because most of that, I think would be covered by, have to be a bonding issue of some kind. So we do a capital improvement program. If that's something large enough, then it'd be included in that. But I mean, everybody else is just, the budget that's brought here is so that these departments can operate on an efficient basis to get the job done, to provide the services that they're hired to provide.
Well, I think too, Bob, that our comprehensive plan is in process and we don't know what's going to come out of that yet.
Right.
And so that next year would be our comprehensive plan, might be based on recommendations from the comp planning that's going on right now. So.
Well, Mr. Mayor, just one question on that, though. I would echo what Bob Jay said, and that is the comprehensive plan, as its name, is what it is. But essentially, the budget is a financial document where you're trying to make the numbers add up.
For the day-to-day operations of the business.
Yeah, day-to-day operations.
Of the city.
Right. Now, right.
One thing I'd like to remind everybody too is, down the road here, we're going to be utilizing, we're trying to set aside some money in the local option sales tax to fund some of these sewer separation projects down the road here, help pay for them, so we don't have to jack the
raise
rates
the
up.
sewer. Right.
Mm-hmm. So
Good point, Bob.
That does actually raise a good question, though, that we discussed when we had the special session about that. Are we going to be looking at incrementally getting back into the incremental tax rate increases for the sewer for the sewer rates?
The monthly charges per unit charges?
Yes.
I'm assuming that's going to show up here pretty soon. I know, like for this first session, we're paying going to be paying all of the engineering fees out of local option sales tax, and I forget how much that's going to be. Larry, you'll have to. I'm thinking 800,000-900,000 maybe. I'm not sure which part.
The Phase 8 Division 1 is estimated at 6 million that we're going to take out of TIF district. The engineering portion of that was about 600,000. We are looking currently at the sewer rates. We will come to a point as we go into the other divisions. If you remember, we've estimated that project to be anywhere between 36 and 40. Kind of depends on how far, as we develop our plans, we have to go back on adjacent streets to connect into the sanitary. And when we evaluate the existing system versus a parallel storm system to do the actual separation. And that's one of the things every time we talk about looking at shifting money from the lost fund into other funds is whatever we do. Bob's done a really good job at offsetting with lost, with CIP, with road use. We've combined all those along with different grants. And each time we can save $1 million from outside funding, we save 1% on your sewer bill. 1% on your sewer bill roughly generates $55,000 that will do debt service on $1 million, depending on the interest rate. Those are just ballpark thumb figures we use to just discuss funding when you start talking $40 million, and that's one phase.
Again, going back to earlier conversations, my concern is that we haven't kept up with the rate increases that we should have been perhaps keeping up with, and it's going to come back to bite the citizens at some point in the future with an astronomical sewer rate.
Well, what we done was we originally, I think it was 2007 when we done the first real comprehensive sewer rate study, where we projected, I think it was 5.5 different raises throughout that period. And when we got to year 3, we looked at, okay, where are we at versus the number of grants we received, where was the lost revenue coming in, how could we shift some of the road use? And with all those combinations, we actually reduced what we were going to do in that first pro forma. We're still doing the same thing. I mean, we track that. Do we hit our sewer rates? And maybe we should attach it to the index and do your annual inflation. One of the things we've tried to do, since that impacts so many, everyone in town basically, is minimize how much we raise that by utilizing all our other sources.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
So really, unless there are more questions about any item in the budget, and to reiterate what Andy said, our levy this year would be 22.4564 or 48. And that's what we're building the budget on. And I think, I said before to the council, we went through every line item in the department head meetings. And I think Bob and Christie have done an admirable job of getting this down to the point where it's up to you now to decide, can you live with it? And are we going to tell them to go ahead and prepare it? Because we've got to get this certified to the state by March 15th. So
Correct.
It's a lot of work, and I don't know what else we can find in our budget. Bob, have you found anything else?
No, we went back through and looked, and I just looking today, still going through. And like I said, we go back and I look at 4 years worth of activity, of 2 years of actual, where we're at for the current year, and then what they think they're going to be using. And over the period, I mean, everybody is within sometimes, 0.5% of what they've asked for the previous years. I track that. I've got 5 years worth of that. Now, sometimes there are some differences, but those are all usually explained. Like plannings was larger last year, but that's because we paid the $300,000 Coles expenditure out of that, and that wasn't part of salaries and fringes. So everything's pretty much, I mean, you could go down, if you ran a line chart, you wouldn't see very much fluctuation with them, other than once in a while when you'd see it jump. But then, like I said, those are easily explained. And then, and I agree with the mayor. Christie she's the one that puts all this information together. It's easy for me to go through and look at it and make changes here, recommend this and that. But then she's the one that's behind all the scenes. Because usually if you make one change in one fund, it affects 3 or 4 others. And so depending on what you change, it could be 10 new spreadsheets for her. So then she has to print those out, figure everything up. It's
a lot of work.
I guarantee you, it wouldn't look nearly as nice if I had to go back through and do it.
Well, and I think your point earlier, you or Andy made the comment, the coverage ratio is still going to be 19.2.
Very healthy.
And that's a good situation in light of our commitment to public safety. So
And hopefully, we'll see businesses move into town or the valuation, assessed valuation increase. That's what we have to hope for now.
are there any other questions or clarifications you want from either Andy or Bob or any of the department people who are here?
Mr. Mayor, just one last question, just in terms of itinerary, having these, again, Bob, is not to put you on the spot, but I recall there's some statutory requirements you have with this in the early February timeframe. So if Bob makes another presentation to council, I think we'll talk about the budget then, and the council can change their mind, of course, but that essentially is it.
If we're given, I'm sorry, Andy, if we're given, if you guys are comfortable with this, we'll go ahead and proceed. We'll, on the calendar, February 19th, when we have our regular council meeting, we'll set the public hearing for March 5th. And then on March 5th, you can vote to approve. And then between that time, Christie will publish a proposed budget in the appropriate time frame. And then once that's done and it's approved, we'll have it up before the county auditor and have it certified prior to the 15th of March.
What Bob said. Yes, I agree with that.
Okay, I think, again, we want to be sure that, this is a very complete booklet that they put together for us, and it does explain things if you go back and compare the budgeted figures with what's in the book. I could not find anything else that we could begin to suggest without getting into eliminating some services, basically. So
Correct. And things down the road for individuals, as far as departments, their equipment's starting to fail. And so we've set everything back. Each time we have the fleet meeting, we push some things back. And at some point in time here, they're going to have to buy stuff. So.
okay, then I'd say at this point, we ought to say good job, Bob and Christie, and we'll proceed with our schedule that you've outlined for the public hearing and the noticing, and then vote in March.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Okay, Council, is there anything else you want to talk about, either that's on the agenda or any comments in general? Okay, anybody in the audience that wants to speak? I see somebody standing up. Good evening, Chief.
I just want to get the word out that between Heather Jones with the Red Cross, Bethany Woodard with Salvation Army, and Tim Richmond, the emergency coordinator for Wapello County, they're in the next couple of nights, they're going to have at Salvation Army, they're going to have a place for people to get out of the cold. This is going to be open 24/7 until at least Friday. I know some local churches and some others have given up to make this thing so it'll be pretty successful. Hopefully in the future, we're going to have a better plan. So when we have cold weather, we'll be able to not at the last moment get something going. So I'm trying to get the word out that there is a place for people to go at least till Friday, because it's supposed to get really bad tonight and tomorrow. So at least people can get out of the cold.
Very good. Very good. Okay.
Chief, did you, and I believe they said that 1015 Transit will give rides there, correct?
1015 will give free rides there. I don't know what 1015, I don't know what their telephone number is, but if you can call them or something, get that number out. They are giving free rides to the 505 West Main, which is right across from O'Hara Hardware.
Okay, very good. Okay, is there anything else? If not, I entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Give that to Holly.
Councilmember Dalby,
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe,
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens,
Yes.
Councilmember Berg.
Yes.
Your Honor,
Yes.
that number is 683-2024.
Say that again, Bob.
683-2024.
2024. Thank you. That's good.